Yeah.
All right. Welcome back. So we got our final segment here on coalition building. So first of all, thank you all for being with us for this morning. I'm assuming you've learned a lot by now and got some great tips. And so we're going to close it out with how to build a great coalition. I talked about that Iowa's Water and Land Legacy Coalition that we built in 2010. This was an urban and rural coalition. And so right now we've got leaders from urban and rural joining us here today. So we've got Bill Menner and Tiffany Tauscher. Bill is from the Iowa Rural Development Council, and Tiffany is here from the Des Moines Partnership. I've worked with both Bill and Tiffany over the years on projects ranging from livable community projects and politics to, of course, working with Tiffany to build the largest skate park in the entire country. And Tiffany, as a fellow skater, I'm sure you're there every morning. Every morning. So why don't you guys introduce yourselves and share a little bit about your backgrounds. Bill, we'll start with you.
Sure. Well, I'm Bill Menner. I live in Grinnell, and I have a consulting business there. And among my clients are, as Brad mentioned, I'm the executive director of the Iowa Rural Development Council, which is a broad-based public-private nonprofit partnership of organizations, governments, entities, for-profits, nonprofits. So you name it, anybody who's interested in rural vitality. So we've got a mailing list of over 400 folks who are interested. They don't always live in rural Iowa, but they're interested in the future of rural communities. I also run the Iowa Rural Health Association, and that confluence of rural health and rural vitality, and you can't have one without the other. So I used to work for USDA. I used to be a radio guy, but I've been in Iowa now for over 30 years. So I consider myself an Iowan.
Well,
in a rural Iowa.
In a rural, I was going to say, there's no one that knows more about rural Iowa than Bill Menner. So anyway, thanks, Bill, for joining us. And Tiffany?
Yes.
Some of your background.
Tiffany Tauscher. I'm the Chief Operations Officer at the Greater Des Moines Partnership and also the President of the Downtown DSM organization, which is under the parent and umbrella organization of the partnership. So partnership, we represent 10 counties throughout the region. So a lot of partnerships bridging gaps with urban, suburban, rural, as well as representing 6,500 business members and 365 investors. So collectively, we're the 4th largest regional chamber of commerce in the entire country. And part of our success really is built on public-private partnerships and coalition building. So love this topic. Some of the big projects that we're working on right now that are requiring a lot of that coalition building, broadband. The skate park was one that we checked off the list. Congratulations, fist bumps. Also the Icon Water Trails project, the Pro Iowa Soccer Stadium and Global Plaza, the airport terminal project, and many more. But we are able to be more successful when we're working together and bringing folks together. So my background, I grew up in small town Iowa, Creston, Iowa, and went to Drake University, studied political science and media, was a reporter for a while, and then made my pathway through the Convention of Visitors Bureau, Catch Des Moines here in town, as well as working for a group of radio stations before landing here at the partnership.
So every time you see a Des Moines is top blank in blank, you can thank Tiffany for that designation because
all of you.
she's the one that helps us get those great rankings. So Tiffany, I guess this is about coalition building, and as Anthony mentioned in his segment, coalition building is really at the front end of the work when you do advocacy because it's an important piece. Who are your allies, right? And so in your mind, what are some of the keys to successful coalition building?
Number one is identifying champions. Who are those individuals that are going to be there with you, helping you navigate challenges, because you are going to run into challenges, and some that you anticipate and some that you don't. So being able to have individuals that are strong enough to push through that and power through that really has been critical and helpful with many of the different projects that we've worked on. But in addition to having those champions, also having those that are loyal to the cause, but also having some that may not be yet loyal or fans. So you think of that sort of that graph where there's the, the Caesars, the early adopters, and then you have the others that kind of come along, and then finally everybody's bought in. So building it out and really thinking strategically about who needs to be at the table and who is impacted by the decisions that you're making. So we utilize a tool called the DSM-4 equity tool that looks at and asks those questions of who else needs to be at the table that maybe you haven't thought of. And sometimes, yes, of course, it's champions, it's advocates, those are loyal to the cause, care about the cause, but then also who's going to push back? Who are going to be those that aren't on your side, that you can bring in closer and bring in as insiders, because you want to understand their perspective, and you may both learn a little bit from that process. So that's something else, a strategy that's been really helpful.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And Bill, I'm sure there's not a huge difference probably in rural coalition building than what Tiffany laid out, but in your mind, what are some of the key elements when you're doing rural advocacy?
Well, you're right. It's very similar. But in a small town, you have a smaller universe of potential partners and advocates and allies. And so the easy solution is often to call the usual suspects. You gotta be everybody on speed dial. You can text them and say, hey, gang, we need to get back together to take on a new project or new this or new that. That creates two potential problems. One is the burnout. It's kind of like you go back to the well too many times, and the usual suspects either are knee deep in other stuff that you've brought them into, or they're just worn out. But you also run the risk of not being representative. You wind up by going to the same usual folks, not reflecting the community, or not reflecting the issue. I always quote Ben Franklin when I talk with small towns: hang together or hang separately. And if we don't work collaboratively, whether it's in a major metropolitan area or a small town of 300, if there isn't some sort of cohesion and common vision, you can't be successful. So part of it is drawing in as many disparate voices as possible.
Well, and I think that's a great strategy, because I also think perception wise, a lot of times when you're wanting to do these projects, you want the perception that everybody is for it, right? And I know with the skate park, Tiffany, when we were working on that, one of the people that we looped into the steering committee was someone from the Des Moines police, right? So we had the police, we had Marty Martin, the president of Drake University. So we had these non-traditional stakeholders that were at the table. And then people said, oh my gosh, the police is supporting the Des Moines skate park. That's a big deal. So I'm wondering, how important is perception in terms of building a coalition and making that as broad as possible?
I think it's critical, and a key piece of that coalition building, but also impacting perceptions in a positive way towards where you hope things will land, is storytelling.
Yes.
It's all about storytelling. And whether it's Brad talking about skating and what it means to you to be able to be a skater dad in front of your kids and get them into the sport, or it's, a 10-year-old that is a skater that's talking about what that skate park could mean to them and now does mean to them, that it's open and operating. But it's storytelling, but also storytelling through multiple different megaphones and multiple different lenses. So being able to help people see themselves in the cause and in that vision.
Yeah, and Bill, when it comes to storytelling, you're talking about going to the same people over and over again. And that can be true of storytelling too, when you're trying to get an advocacy project done. Enroll. Well, there's this one guy who's just so great on camera, or this one guy who's so good with the media. One of the things that we're really curious about at AARP is finding new blood in rural America to move the needle in terms of these livability projects. When I say livability, of course, we're talking about everything from complete streets to affordable housing, to even crosswalks, and as Anthony was mentioning, the bike lanes. And so, how do you find those new voices in rural Iowa to come to the table with project? Is do you do mail? Do you make phone calls? Do you hold public meeting? What's the secret?
Well, so everything's changed since COVID because everything is remote. But I have the good fortune of having spent 8 years at USDA as the state director for rural development, which in essence is a giant infrastructure bank for small towns and small town projects. So I got to travel the state for 8 years, helping to sign big checks or meet with leaders and see firsthand stories. So I have a list of places I always talk about: Manning, Woodbine,
Manning, everyone talks about Manning.
Stanton,
Yes.
Macokota, but they've almost become my usual suspects. So I think my biggest challenge, and what the Rural Development Council allows me to do, is to go out and see those new places that are doing things. Glidden and Traer and Keosauqua, and try to expand the universe of case studies that I'm sharing. I think the other big thing is that we host a rural summit every year. The Rural Summit draws together leaders from across rural communities. We ask them to come in 3-person teams, and we build the agenda around case studies because we want folks to go home with a blueprint for action, whether they're addressing livable communities or affordable housing or broadband. We want them to see how somebody across the street or on the other side of Iowa did it themselves. Because if Woodbine can do it, why can't Preston do it?
Yes. Well, when it comes to coalition building, case studies are so important. And I would say Main Street, Iowa has terrific case studies. Keep Iowa Beautiful has case studies as well. You were talked about going to the same well over and over again. And I am guilty of that with Charles City, I have to say.
And they're on my list too.
And part of the reason is because they're an age-friendly city. They applied. We've got this great group of volunteers in Charles City. And we've done some amazing work with them. And one of the projects early on that attracted me to Charles City was that whitewater course, because that was so visionary. And just for people that may not know, Charles City, they were one of the first, if not the first, communities in Iowa to remove a Lowhead Dam and build a water trail through downtown Charles City. And I think economic development shows that they've been now doing that, attracted $600,000 or $700,000 a year in just economic development for a project that I think cost about $700,000 initially 10 years ago. So when it comes to water trails, and the reason I'm bringing this up, Tiffany, is I can't think of another project where there were so many different stakeholders. And I think with the water trails, aside from the fundraising, it's been the coalition building that's been the most important piece. Can you explain what that coalition looks like and how because we're doing this big water trail project in Des Moines and you're kind of heading that up. What does that project look like and how did you build the coalition that you've been able to build?
We looked at the Charles City model
Okay.
as an example.
Everyone
but
does.
seriously, and we looked at several others around the country too, just to better understand how did they find success? Because this is a huge undertaking for our state. The Icon Water Trails project is 150 miles long. It's for radius, it's 86 different project sites throughout.
God,
you're dealing with
crazy.
city, state, you're dealing with federal, you've got Army Corps of Engineers, you have those that recreate on the water, those that don't believe in recreating on the water, but want to be on, the banks of the river, fishermen, business community, you name it. For water trails, it really comes down to case studies, looking at the facts. The facts tell us, and what we know is that there is a huge opportunity for our state to activate our rivers, to remove those dams that are downtown, but also to bring to life the rivers and encourage folks to experience the rivers in a new and different way, kind of go back to our roots. So whether that's you're in the water surfing in downtown Des Moines in a few years, believe it or not, we'll be able to do that. Or if you're on the banks of the river watching this, it does bring us closer together. And the timing of all this has actually been really good, knowing that with COVID, there is more folks are comfortable with being outdoors. And there's been this sort of sense of embracing our natural resources in a greater way, which is in part what this project does, is it also brings together those who have various opinions on water quality in Iowa. And it's bringing those folks together to understand one another's perspectives and also how can we develop an action plan that helps us get to a better place with water quality, flood mitigation, as well as that recreational piece. So, Bill, I think you hit on some really great points with case studies, but then also the action items, making sure that you're being clear and upfront that this is what this project is designed to do. This is what we don't, these are not our goals. And part of the Water Trails project is it's to be the most transformational project of our generation. It's to address water quality, flood mitigation efforts, and also to help us embrace our natural resources.
And what are the buckets of advocate of coalitions? So you've got the business community, you've got the governments, you've got environmentalists. Are there any others in addition to that?
Residents, visitors, which certainly some are in multiple buckets. But it is a project that has touched more groups, more audiences than any other project that I can think of.
Yeah, it's an amazing project, and kudos to you all for it. I mean, it has taken a long time, and that's the other thing about when you're building these coalitions. And we talk a lot about patience and the amount of time that you think it's going to take, and then you probably just add another year to that, and then you might be on track. And Bill, you know, we were talking about some of these communities that everybody highlights, and you're right about Manning. And so I just want to get, what is it about the Mannings and the Stantons and the Charles Cities and these other communities? What are they doing right in terms of coalition and educating others? Why is everyone looking at them as a model for the future of rural Iowa?
It's all about leadership in these towns. And it's not always elected leadership, but they have a core. Every one of these towns has a capacity that's created because they have a core of folks leading the charge, whether it's a mayor, plus a city council, plus the chamber director, plus a core of civic leaders. They have capacity to do things that are remarkable because they have a leadership component that exists. And that's why the Rural Development Council works closely with the Governor's Empower Rural Iowa Task Force, and rural leadership development is one of the keys to that. And you can make so much happen, even if you're in a town of 200, if you have a group of leaders who are aligned and moving in the same direction and have a vision. And if your vision is, we want to go back to the way things were in 1955, that's not a vision. If your vision is, we want to keep things exactly the same as they are today and never change, that's not a vision. But finding some place you want to get as a community and having leaders that will take you there, that makes all the difference. And those places that I mentioned, every one of them has a remarkable set of folks leading the charge.
Well, and someone in the chat just mentioned service clubs, and that's a really good point because a lot of smaller communities do have service clubs that get together on a fairly regular basis and identify key projects in the community. Do you work with service clubs in rural Iowa?
Well, I'll give you a great example. I create downtown development group in Grinnell that I used to lead, created a summertime music festival and was part of an ag appreciation day. Well, at some point, you know, this small group of quasi-governmental folks can only lead it so far. What we did was we partnered with Rotary, or we partnered with Kiwanis, and transitioned the operation of these events to them because they have a consistent membership, right? They have a desire to serve. And so engaging with them in ways that basically bring them in on some of these ongoing projects or project development can be really impactful.
Well, you're right about that. And I think for the skate park, I mean, alone, I can't tell you how many Rotary Club and Kiwanis that we presented to. I'm curious, so you've got these coalitions, and now comes, what do you do with them, right? And I'm just remembering our time on the skate park committee. This was a really important question early on. Do we, for example, do we meet regularly? Do we task steering committee members with specific goals? How do we sequence fundraising, right? Do we raise a lot of money early on from kind of corporations and then do grassroots, or do we do grassroots fundraising first and then tap the corporations? We ended up doing the big money first and then the grassroots later. But I guess it's a long way of saying, okay, so you've got your coalition, maybe use water trails or another example if you want, but what do you do with them once you've got them in place?
So once you've set that clear vision and that goal and get everybody around the table, it is about outlining, here's what we need to do. And they may have other perspectives that may change your path to success a little bit. And that's okay, because they're going to have that sense of ownership because they've contributed. It's not just, hey, here's your marching orders, go. It's here's where we want to land. Here's what we propose. How do you make it better? So thinking about that question of how do you make it better? And knowing that everybody's got a sort of different set of input experience to bring to the table. But it was really helpful with Skate Park to know that going into those first meetings with that cabinet, that we wanted to make this project not only successful, but we wanted to make a splash. Well, then as we went further along, we realized not only do we want to make it a splash, we want this to be the largest skate park in the entire country.
Be aspirational.
Right, exactly. And I think it took that group of individuals being around the table to push one another to get to the place where we're like, are we going to do this? Yeah, we're going to do it. So that was not the plan originally, right? We stretched beyond what we originally set out to do. And it's been a huge success, but having those clear deliverables and then also allowing others to provide input and then making it really clear what your ask is. My expectation, Brad, of you on this new up and coming thing is that you almost get one new contributor. Bill, we want you to go get 5 new people to sign up to be a part of our coalition. So having some set goals that not only you've outlined, but also there's buy-in on.
Right.
I'll say having going beyond the usual suspects and engaging those new partners and then leveraging their networks are going to bring in folks that you may have never reached previously. So making sure that you start with a broader group than the usual suspects and get them to reach out too. Then that way you wind up with audiences and constituencies, young people, old people, disabled people,
Right.
minorities, the homeless. I mean, there's all sorts of folks that get missed when you just reach out to the usual suspects.
You know, there's this movement now, speaking of mix, right? There's this multi-generational movement. And I think there are a lot of, you mentioned leaders in some of these small towns. There are a lot of leaders with some ideas, but they don't know how to build broad support. And so they're looking for multi-generational leadership. And I do think that's a really good model because especially in small towns, you've got older residents who have time on their hands and are super passionate about their community. But they may not be great at some of the things younger, like maybe social media or something. I'm just not stereotype, but it's, you know, I'm not great at social media, but my kids are, right? So Bill, I guess, how important is it to tap, you know, the age range that I'm talking about to get these projects done in rural communities?
If you want young people to stay or young people to come back and you empower them to be part of the solution today, you have a better chance in the long run of either getting them to stick around or to influence the place so that they come back someday. I think, and then building that legacy of that relationship with older residents and building bridges that might not exist, that can be such a big deal. It's so impactful on the community to have that broad coalition, you know, that rainbow of everything, ages, colors, genders, you name it. It makes a difference.
Right.
And it can make a project happen.
It's also hugely beneficial as you think about the future because you're training your future leaders, right? So bringing them along, you're building the bench for the future.
Right.
And helping them see it and experience it is going to get them to a place that next time around, they may feel comfortable leading the charge. So agree to all those things, but also would add, this is also about building for the future.
Well, let's close in the future. I know we're running out of time, but the so you've got AARP as an audience right now, right? How, in terms of future projects and future local advocacy and building the livable communities that you know we're going to need, Tiffany, I'll start with you. What are the types of projects that you would love to see folks, our people, take on in urban communities across the state? And again, we're focusing on really the built environment, and so the complete streets, bike lanes, connected sidewalks, walkability, affordable housing, parks. What are the types of projects that you would love to see us tackle?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's great what you're doing already, and thank you all for your dedication to this important work. Walkability cities, walkable communities are critical. In addition to that, we need experiences for retail, because as you think about how the consumer is changing and the environment is changing so quickly, we need to adapt to that. So the more walkable your community, the more realistic it is for us to have retail experiences and inspire those that operate those stores to have experiences when you walk in and shop. And same with restaurants. There's some holiday pop-up restaurants
Right.
in our community right now. So inspiring others to take those actions. And then in addition to that, I would say just not being afraid to step in on those big projects. For our community right now, it's water trails. We'd love to have more AARP advocates and those involved with that project. The USL Pro Stadium and Global Plaza, soccer advocates, because all of these things contribute to a sense of place, and placemaking is really what's going to help our state continue to grow population,
Right.
and to make our state even stronger. So anything related to placemaking.
Bill, 30 seconds, same question to you.
Quality of life. Anything, and every town has a different definition of quality of life. And what are they talking about? It could be facades. How does your town look? Do you have arts and culture? Are there things to do recreationally or otherwise? And that's a difference maker for a small town that's trying to recruit workers and retain them and keep young people. It's all about, is there something to do? Do you have a place, that place-making component? And every town has something different that they're working on. And I would just encourage AARP members and advocates to get involved in your town and get your hands dirty.
You heard Bill, get involved in your town. So thank you again for being with us today. This has been a great day, and hopefully you're taking away something, right? You're taking away, all right, I'm thinking about this project in my community. I'm an urban community. Here are the steps that I need to take. Here are the building blocks. Here's the coalition that I need to build. Here's how I do communications. But if you take nothing else away, right? Understand that AARP really does want to help you get to the finish line with your project. And so please, please, please think about what you want to do to make your community more livable. Reach out to AARP. We're hoping to do this again next year, hopefully in person. We do these conferences. I was hesitant to do it on Zoom, but I wanted to get things started. But next year, hopefully we're going to do it in person, and we'll do it over a couple days in a great environment and have a lot of energy, and maybe even a meal or two. And so hopefully you can join us again next year for this topic. But again, if you want to reach out, please do so. Brad Anderson, banderson@aarp.org. And I can't thank you enough for joining us today. Thank you.